How's it going? And welcome to episode 175 of On the Wire, a proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. I am Kevin Hastings. You can follow me at Hastings Kevin. Adam Howe can be followed at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Adam is off this week, but fear not. We've got a great show lined up for you. And by we, I mean myself and no stranger to the show, our good friend Todd Whitestone has graciously agreed to join me for one of, if not the most hectic Faab weekend of the season.
Yeah.
Todd can be found at Telstar7 on the Twitter machine and at ftnfantasy.com, where he puts out a weekly NFBC main event Faab review article each week, a must read for fantasy baseball enthusiasts. Todd, thank you so much for joining me. How's the trade deadline week been treating you and your fantasy teams so far?
It's been a whirlwind, Kevin, because there's so many things. Like you have a guy in your roster, and then you think, well, he's going to be useless, and then something happens, and he's valuable, and another guy you thought was locked in is not going to get a lot of playing time. So, I had Heston Kjerstad in one place, and we'll talk about it, but he's not too valuable right at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. That there's a lot of that, and this is great. We're going to do things a little differently this week, and kind of combine the news and notes section with our focus topic, which, as everybody would expect, I'm sure, is all of the player movement and possible ramifications that we've seen earlier this week. So we're going to go team by team and see if we can make sense of how these moves may affect our fantasy teams in the short and long term. There's a whole lot to go over here, Todd. So let's, let's just dive right in here.
Yeah.
And we're going to go team by team. You did an amazing job adding things here on the outline. I just want to say that right off the bat. Pretty much most of the moves for every team. Both hitting lineups and how it'll affect pitching rotations and even relief pitchers. I concentrated on going through this morning, and we have 3 to 4 days of lineups that we've seen since these moves were made, and we can talk about that and how that's affecting everybody as well. So I think, like we've both mentioned, we got a lot to go here. So let's start off with Baltimore. What do you think about the moves Baltimore made?
Man, it was confusing. It's one of the more confusing ones to me. The easy one was they got Zach Eflin. He's a good, solid pitcher. I think he'll fill right in for them. He's pretty much all owned, though. It doesn't really affect anything. Then they went out and got Trevor Rogers, who's really been pitching poorly over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's fine.
Other than just a couple of flashes that get us excited, and then he's gone back to not being very good.
2021, I think he had a good year, but that was the last time. Yeah. So, they gave away Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers, who, they're not the top of the creme de la creme of prospects, perhaps, but they're good, solid, possible major leaguers. I thought they could bring back more than Trevor Rogers, but regardless, I wouldn't pick up Trevor Rogers myself in most leagues unless he starts showing us something, and he didn't do that in the first outing that he had with them. Then they got Austin Slater and Eloy Jimenez, and those guys are playing for the first time tonight. The game hasn't started. But I don't know what they're doing with that, because this sort of boxed out Heston Kjerstad, who I thought was a good young player and could have a lot of upside. But they seem to be interested in having them play against lefties, which I don't think they really needed. But, of course, they didn't call me to ask that question. But anyway, they're going to have a good lineup against Joey Cantillo tonight. So they did nothing we can do about that. They also got Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto, who I think are good relievers, but they don't seem to be about to step in for Kimbrel, who's been having problems. So I think his job is relatively safe as long as he rights the ship a little. So that's the story. They seemingly opened up playing time by trading Austin Hayes away, and then they got Eloy and Slater, and they boxed it all up again. I don't think there's much to do in terms of ads for Baltimore. You might worry about Ryan O'Hearn, his playing time, but I don't think there's really much action to be taken unless you disagree with me.
Well, looking at the lineups since Tuesday, I was worried about Ryan O'Hearn possibly losing a little bit of playing time, but he has continued to start against all right-handed starting pitching out of the lineup. I believe they're facing a lefty tonight, if I remember correctly, when I looked earlier. And that's nothing new. We know he doesn't start typically versus lefties. So I am happy to see he's still getting that playing time versus righties so far, because I have him on a lot of teams. And another thing that's intriguing, Kobe Mayo got recalled.
Right.
And he's got a lot of availability if you're interested in Kobe Mayo. He has started both games since being recalled versus a righty and a lefty. And of course, Jackson Holliday now back and starting his 5th straight game at second base. He's got quite a bit of availability. Over a third of main events he's available, and about 2/3 of 12-team online championships. And just one note for people like me that may have been benching Colton Cowser there for a little while. I didn't drop him, but I was benching him because he wasn't performing well. He's now led off in 7 straight games, and over that period hitting .345 with 2 home runs. So I'm getting him back in my lineups, and I did, fortunately, for this week. So that's what I've noticed as far as their lineup since these moves have been made.
Yeah, that's true. Mayo and Holliday are definitely interesting. I have them listed later. But I think the Mayo thing was probably because Westberg got hurt. He's probably out for most of the season. But Holliday, I think once they traded Norby, they wanted to bring Holliday back. So that's a good call. Those are the 2 guys that we should be thinking about going after.
Nice. Yeah, let's head over to Boston. They got Paxton came in. They added Danny Jansen, a couple other players. What do you think about what Boston's doing here?
Well, I'm not a James Paxton guy at this point in his career. He just doesn't look good to me. Quinn Priester they got from Pittsburgh, but I think he's a long-term play. I don't think he's really going to be in the rotation except for maybe a spot start, and I'm not sure he's completely ready anyway. So there's no pickup there for me. Danny Jansen, of course, has always been interesting when he's been healthy, but he's going to split with Connor Wong, I think, and therefore, if you need a catcher that plays half the time, I think he would be fine. But I don't know if many people, even in 15s, need that. It does hurt Wong a little because I think he was playing more than 50%. So if you're a Connor Wong owner, you may want to watch his playing time over the next week or so just to see how many starts he gets.
Absolutely. I did notice that they do have Wong playing first base on Saturday night with Jansen behind the plate. They had been splitting pretty evenly this week up until then, but they're both in the lineup on Saturday.
Okay, that's good. That's encouraging. So maybe they can eke out some value together. The only other thing to mention is Luis Garcia of the Angels was traded there, and he probably is the backup to Kenley Jansen. Kenley, always has some back issues, and if he's out for 2 or 3 weeks over the last part of the year, maybe Luis Garcia can come in for saves, or maybe if you're a Kenley Jansen owner, you should think about rostering him if you have the room. But I don't think he's going to get near-term saves while Jansen is healthy. So again, not a ton of ads directly in Boston as far as I'm concerned, but maybe you see it differently. I'm not sure.
No, I don't. I agree. There something concerning to me is David Hamilton sitting for the second straight game, once versus a lefty, once versus a righty, with Nick
Yeah,
Sogard playing second base one of those games, shortstop the other. And Sogard, he puts the ball in play, can get on base and do some things, but not a ton of power, not a lot of speed.
yeah,
Not somebody I'm really interested in for fantasy, but for those rostering David Hamilton, this could be an issue.
I agree. And then the other thing that might happen to Hamilton is Vaughn Grissom could be working his way back. They might,
Right.
if Boston is completely out of the wild card race, they might just say, let's just let Grissom get 4 or 5 weeks of solid playing time, and Hamilton really isn't going to play much at all then.
Yeah, let's move over to New York, where
Yeah.
Jazz has made quite a first impression. I really wish I had him on more teams. I do. I have him in a spot or two.
Okay.
Really
Okay.
wish I had more because he's looking amazing.
Yeah. Well, the Yankees are my team, as you might remember. So
Absolutely.
they were going through a bad time there, and Jazz came just at the right moment for a little energy. I don't think he's going to hit 4 homers in 3 games or whatever he did, but he's definitely gives them some speed, a little different look, and the fact that he can maybe play some third base, even though I don't think he's outstanding defender there, that would really help because that's their weak spot in the lineup,
Hmm.
really. But of course, he's 100% owned. He's not going to really change fantasy teams too much. But I think the rest of the lineup has looked significantly better. Stanton is back. Their Volpe is hitting more now. So I believe that they'll score runs at a much better clip over the last few weeks. And maybe people that have the other pieces of the Yankee lineup will do better.
Yep, I agree. Not much actionable here for our fantasy teams, but
No.
I think pretty much anybody you roster in the Yankees lineup got a little bit of an upgrade with
Yeah.
the Jazz edition. The whole lineup is better.
I agree. And Jazz is an improved fantasy commodity himself, I think. Um,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
when you're batting near Soto and Judge, that's always going to help. Um, all right, so Tampa, I always think Tampa has figured something out before I have figured it out, but they got Christopher Morel, traded away Isaac Paredes, and they also traded for. So again, Morel is like one of these, power guys that can go on a heater, but then he hits 210 or something. And Dylan Carlson has been a disappointment. But if Tampa has figured out how to fix him, or does in the future figures it out, he could be good. I'm personally not going to try to get Dylan Carlson on fantasy teams, and Morel is widely owned anyway. So I don't think there's a lot of fantasy value, but I did want to mention that Junior Caminero, it looks very much like he would be coming up August 25 or 26. I mean, I talked to my main event partner is RotoWire's James Anderson, and he
Yep.
told me that that's the date, excuse me, where they get another year of control. So
Right. That's where it's safe that they won't go over the
yeah,
130 at bat threshold
yeah.
to no longer be rookie eligible. Exactly.
So his strong feeling is that Caminero comes up late August. So now today is August 3. So I think it's too early in most leagues to try to add him if he's available. But maybe in a week or two, depending on your league, if you have a chance to add him for a small amount, you could think about it and hold him for a week or two, because I think it's pretty sure that Tampa's going to give him run towards the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Yep. I agree with that. Absolutely. With Richie Palacios out 4 to 6 weeks, what I've noticed with the lineup this week, and it's only been about 4 games and they've only faced one lefty, but it really appears to me that Carlson and Josh Lowe could be in a pretty
Mm-hmm.
strict platoon. We know Tampa likes to play that way. And
Yep.
then and so far, both Siri and Johnny DeLuca are playing every day.
Yes.
So with Palacios out, the outfield's not as crowded. There's still four guys there for three spots, but it appears to me, and I'm under the assumption going forward that it's probably a Carlson low platoon and
Right.
Siri and DeLuca playing most days.
Didn't Josh Palacios get hurt also? I mean, did they
I
get
think
hurt?
so. Yeah.
They got hurt the same
Crazy.
day. The brothers get hurt. I don't know if that's really the way you're supposed to do it, but anyway, they're both on the injured list, if I'm not incorrect.
I'm pretty excited about Joey Loperfido getting playing time in Toronto. What do you think?
All right, so I've watched Loperfido and I've been sort of unimpressed with him. And when Houston trades somebody, I always think maybe they know something. So I'm not. I mean, I wouldn't say he's a hands-off guy or anything, but I feel like yes, he's going to get playing time. But I just haven't seen him really drive the ball when I've watched him. Maybe I missed certain games that he looked better, but he's had a 236 average with 2 homers. It's 38 games, but I'm a little lukewarm on him. Maybe I'm incorrect, but I do agree with you that he's going to be playing. So I think maybe that's what he needs to sort of figure things out is regular playing time.
Yeah. 3 hits, including a triple in the first 2 games in the Toronto lineup. He is in there a third straight game. What
Okay.
I am loving about this so far since he's joined Toronto, he's starting his third straight game and all 3 of them, the number 2 spot in the lineup. That's what I'm excited about.
Yes, that's
If he can get things going with George Springer getting on base ahead of him and Vlad and others behind him, we could get some nice counting stats out
That's
of
true. That's
Loperfido.
true. That's a primo spot. So yeah, I agree with you. Not as high for me, but certainly a consideration. The other guy, Alejandro Kirk, should get more regular playing time with Jansen gone. So I think maybe he could sort of work his way out of the bad early funk that he had in the season. And then the other guy was Luis de los Santos, who they brought up from Buffalo. And he plays kind of all over, but he might platoon with Barger at third base. But he didn't play the last few games, so I wasn't as keen on him, at least for now. I don't think he's a pickup right now because I like to see some playing time, and he's just not getting it.
Right. He's been up for 4 games and hasn't been in the starting lineup yet. And this is intriguing to me. They're continuing to run with Ernie Clement at third base. And this is one of those situations. This always intrigues me and makes me take a really close look at guys like this if I think they are 12-team viable. Because it's one of these guys, there's such a huge gap in rostership between the main event where he's 84% rostered and the online championships where he's only 5% rostered. Right now, he is the everyday third baseman, so he's probably worth taking a look at.
Yep, agree. And then the only other guy to mention is Chad Green, who isn't really available in NFBC, but maybe other listeners are in Yahoo or ESPN leagues, and he's certainly the closer now. And if he's available, I think he's a good pickup for your team.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Let's move to the American League Central and the Chicago White Sox. What do you see going on in Chicago?
Well, the big winner is Miguel Vargas. So he's the guy I think should be the main target for fantasy managers. He's only 3% owned in NFBC 12s and 12% in the main event. He should get regular playing time. He's always been able to hit, and I just don't think the Dodgers ever gave him regular time in the lineup. So I would say if you can get him, he's in NFBC, he's eligible at second and outfield. so that can fit most any fantasy team. And I think he's going to bat second and play every day pretty much, and Chicago has no reason to take him out of the lineup, so he should be fine. The other guy I thought was going to get an upgrade was Gavin Sheets because Pham was traded, but he's sat 2 of the last 4, so I'm not that big on him right now. If they're just going to sort of spot start him, I don't see the point of rostering Gavin Sheets.
Yep. I agree on Vargas, and I knew you would agree on Vargas. I think that's probably a requirement to write for FTN Fantasy.
That's true.
So, but yeah, I'd love to see him get regular run and see what he can do. The best part to me about it is these first 4 games since he joined the White Sox, he hit second the first 2, and now has moved to leadoff for the most recent 2 starts.
Nice.
So hitting at the top of the lineup, playing every day. I really think that getting regular run will improve his numbers. I agree with you. Baldwin has moved up to the 2 hole those last 2 games that Vargas has jumped into the leadoff spot. And he's got a lot of availability. Typically when it's a bad team like the White Sox, I'm really only interested in the guys at the top of the lineup.
Yeah,
so
I
it's
agree.
nice to see these 2 guys with availability getting everyday playing time in the 1 and 2 spots.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think the White Sox are going to have a vaunted lineup, but they still will score some runs, and maybe they'll run a little more. And so certainly I think you can do worse than getting these guys in your fantasy lineup.
Absolutely. The Guardians added to the pitching staff and added a power speed combo guy here.
Yep. So Alex Cobb is the pitcher. He's getting close to being ready. He was been on rehab assignment. I think he might start next week. I'm not 100% sure on that. He's 8% owned in the 12s and 95% owned in the main event. So you got to check your league to see really if he's kicking around or not. But he's always been pretty good when he's been healthy. I don't think he's a frontline starter, but he's definitely a good league average pitcher and can do better than that from time to time. So I would strongly consider adding him if you need a starter. And then Lane Thomas, he's pretty much widely owned already, but he was moved, and he's sort of been picking it up lately. And he does, as everybody knows, he hits for a pretty good average and runs, stolen 11 bases across the last, across July. So that was pretty good numbers when I checked it. I would say Cobb is the big target from Cleveland. Thomas is all he did really was he kicked out Will Brennan, who's now in the minors. So I just think it's Cobb if you're looking at the Guardians.
Yep, I agree. I'm a little concerned with Lane Thomas's stolen bases. Okay. I know it's only been 3 games, but he hasn't even attempted one yet. And we know Washington was turning everybody loose all the time.
True.
And he's 3 straight games with no stolen base attempts. You know how far you got to go back with Washington since he went 3 straight games without a stolen base attempt? A full month ago.
Wow.
You have to go back to July 1st through 3rd since he went 3 straight games without a stolen base attempt. So I am a little concerned that the stolen bases, I don't think they won't go completely away. Cleveland does run some, but nobody's running as much as Washington.
Yeah, Washington is crazy. I mean, they send people no matter what. I mean, I agree. Might be a little lower over the last 2 months of the season.
Just one other note with their lineup, Angel Martinez has moved back up to the 2 spot for those rostering him. They'll be happy to see that. Lane Thomas dropping to 5th, another spot that might give the stolen bases a bit of a hit here. But he's still in the lineup every day. We're still playing Lane Thomas.
I was encouraged about that and how Martinez, because I have him in a few spots, and I heard other people talking and saying, well, he's really on the outs now. He's not going to really play, and that really hasn't been true so far. He's been in the
Right.
lineup, and he's I think he's been playing fairly well. Not going to argue that he's a big huge offensive weapon, but he's been playing pretty well, hitting for average. I'm hoping that he sticks around.
Yeah, I am as well. Shortstop was, or excuse me, it was. I was hearing about him for a couple of weeks, but
Right,
he wasn't really getting picked up everywhere, right? We were
right.
hearing about him, and some people were picking him up, and then I had a couple of spots where I really needed someone like him.
Yeah.
So I have him in a couple of spots, and I'm after a couple of games of dropping in the lineup, the fifth and seventh. I believe he's back in the 2 hole tonight, so I was really glad to see that.
Yeah, I think he's going to be okay. I could be wrong, but he's shortstop and outfield eligible, so that's really a nice combination if you have him on your team. So I'm hoping that he stays and is playable.
So Detroit didn't make any moves, but
Right.
they have recalled a couple of guys this week that I think we're probably interested in.
Yeah, well, Dylan Dingler, as a catcher, I really hadn't heard of, but he's 25. He's hit 17 homers in Toledo, and I thought he could be an ad in 2 catcher leagues, but he only has played one of the 4 games since he's been up. So I'm not sure. He could end up splitting time, which would be a decent outcome, but I would say I would hold off on adding Dingler unless you're really desperate at catcher. But they didn't really do much else, although you mentioned that they activated Parker Meadows, and he's certainly a good asset if you can get a hold of him. I think he's available fairly widely, so I would consider Meadows if you can.
Yeah, he's available in a good number of 12-team leagues, but he is 91% rostered in the main event, and he was recalled Saturday from or off the IL Saturday,
Right.
and he is in the lineup hitting 7th and playing center field. So I'd be interested in the 12s where he's available, and like Adam always says, it only takes a couple of seconds to check if he's available in your 15s as well.
Definitely check. I would check on him. Sure. Okay.
All right. So
your Royals.
Go ahead, Todd. I'm sorry.
Your Royals. I'm interested in your take on what Kansas City did, but let me set it up for you. So they traded for Hunter Harvey and Lucas Erceg to help their bullpen. They got Michael Lorenzen for the rotation, and Paul DeYoung, I assume, for kind of utility infielder. So what I'd like to know from your take, Kevin, is do you think Harvey or Erceg could get saves, or do you think they're going to sort of stick with MacArthur unless he really has a few more bad outings?
Well, I was already speculating with Hunter Harvey. I picked him up a couple of weeks ago in spots, thinking that MacArthur had lost his job. Now I am more in the camp that, based on what we saw this week, and they didn't have save opportunities. They haven't had a save since Tuesday, and Sam Long got that one because MacArthur had gotten the save the day prior on Monday. They didn't want to use him a second day in a row because he had also pitched Sunday. So, but that was before we had seen the Erceg acquisition.
Right.
Now I'm speculating. I think Erceg probably ends up getting more saves than MacArthur the rest of the season, but they're still giving MacArthur a chance. I would like to see him make the move and go Erceg full time, but I think MacArthur is still going to get some opportunities, but probably not all of them. It's kind of a messy situation.
Okay, sure. So the only thing about Harvey is that he's been a good pitcher all year and even last year too. but he sort of had a little bit of a rough patch over the last 3 weeks. So I think that might have hurt him. He also, I think, gave up a couple runs when he as a Royal. So I think that might have set him back just a little. I'm not sure he's out of the mix or anything, but yeah. So Urseg, I think he might be as good a pitcher as Harvey. So it just comes down to what the manager wants to do. They might just mix it up depending on who's coming up in the ninth inning.
Right.
So I don't know that if you want to if as a fantasy manager you want to take a shot and just throw your hat in the ring with one of the two of them, I think it could pay off. But I don't know that it's going to be resolved in 7 days or something.
Yeah, it could be even messier than that because Chris Bubik has performed very well as a reliever since being recalled. And my thought was they would begin to stretch him out because we've seen Alec Marsh have some rough outings recently, but then the Lorenzen addition has kind of made me move away from that. So I could see Bubik getting used in the ninth inning as well.
That would be crazy. And didn't they send Marsh down to the minors when they got Lorenzen?
Right, with the Lorenzen addition, yes. And Lorenzen's pitching very well here on Saturday evening.
Okay, good. So Lorenzen is a good, solid arm. I think he's not, top of the line Zach Wheeler or something, but he's really solid. He's going to give you a chance to win. I think he should be considered as an ad, depending on how deep your pitching staff goes, and of course what his matchups are. Let's see. I think his matchups were pretty good. I listed them at Detroit and versus St. Louis. So there's nothing scary about that. I think that people could consider adding Lorenzen if he's available in your league, and also you need a starting pitcher.
Yeah, his first start with Kansas City here on Saturday evening. He's through 4 innings. He has walked a couple, but only 3 hits and 4 strikeouts in the 4 innings. So he's going pretty well.
Okay, good. And then
biggest. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that in terms of Paul DeJong, I would just watch the situation, especially if you're a Massey or Michael Garcia owner, because if they decide that they got 3 people for 2 spots and they're just going to rotate them, that's going to hurt everybody just a little. But right now, I'd assume that DeJong is just filling in and playing against a lefty or something.
Yeah, I think he will definitely play versus lefties and probably in Massey's spot in those situations. Massey typically does sit versus lefties. Saturday is a little deceiving. The starter is listed as a lefty, but it was Holton. He's an opener. He's been working. I think this is the 4th open that he's done, 4th consecutive appearance as an opener, going about 2 to 3 innings each time. So the Royals did leave their left-handed hitters in the lineup on Saturday evening. But yeah, I agree. DeJong definitely against lefties, and then some spot appearances here and there versus righties. But it'll be Massey that definitely sits versus lefties.
Yep.
Also, a couple of months ago, I tweeted out that Hunter Renfroe was on one of his notorious hot streaks, and we know he's streaky and it won't last forever. But what the streaks do give us is playing time. And he's still on that hot streak.
Okay.
He's playing every day in right field, hitting 5th or 6th. And since May 12th, almost 200 plate appearances, 197 plate appearances. He's slashing 301, 381, 520.
Wow.
Over a 10% walk rate, just barely over a 15% strikeout rate. That's 149 WRC plus. He's got 8 home runs, 30 RBI, and 25 runs scored in that period. Just like a couple of years ago when he was in Boston in the shallower leagues, he's going unnoticed. People aren't adding Hunter Renfroe, and he's been doing this for almost 3 months now. He is 93% rostered in main events, but only 18% in the 12 team online championships. And he is definitely a top 60 outfielder for 12-team, 5 outfielder leagues. He should be universally rostered, even in 12s, and he's only
Okay.
18%.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call. Yeah, he sort of
Uh,
goes unnoticed sometimes, but definitely when he's on a streak, he is playable in your lineup for sure.
Yeah, I remember when he was in Boston, I was including him in my Faab preview article every single week because he wasn't being added. And I remember Casey Bubba for Bubba in the Bloom. He said the same thing. Like every week, I'm putting Hunter Renfroe in my article,
Right,
and
right.
nobody's picking him up.
Yeah. If he had
All
been
right, let's move
if
on
he
to
had been a
Minnesota.
rookie, Kevin, if he had been a rookie, the people would have been on him.
Triple-digit bids, right?
Yeah, right. All right, Minnesota. Minnesota. They did pretty much nothing. They received Trevor Richards, and that doesn't do much for fantasy value. But they got a. I guess the only comment I'd make to you, see if you agree with me, they got a pretty good team, Minnesota. I mean, they are balanced. They got a lot of sort of duplicate parts around the infield. They got some nice left-handed bats. Maybe they're a little weak if you have a top left-handed pitcher, but I feel like they got some decent starters. These guys could be tough to get out of the playoffs if they hit the ground running.
I agree. Very tough. And the problem for us is, for years, and I think it kind of gets overblown a little bit with Tampa. I don't think they do the platoon matchups
Right.
quite as heavy as they used to, but they still have that reputation. And then it was San Francisco under Gabe Kapler. Nobody plays more platoon matchups right now in Major League Baseball than Minnesota.
Minnesota,
There's
right.
there's only 2 players that you can count on playing every day. Brooks Lee, because he's a shortstop, and then Carlos Santana is playing every day versus righties and lefties at first base. So
Unbelievable.
Carlos Santana, if you need some powers, a sneaky ad, he's still got
That's
some
true.
availability out there in 12s.
Okay, that's a good call. He's always he's not one of these guys that's deteriorated. Some people like at age 33, they start falling off. Santana, like he looks like he's going to go on forever.
Yeah, he's got his highest batting average since 2019 at 245. That works.
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah, Houston
Okay.
added a pitcher here.
Yeah, they got Yusei Kikuchi, who's been totally underwhelming with Toronto.
Except for the strikeouts.
Right, he's got good strikeouts. He 4.75 ERA, 134 WHIP. So those ratios didn't help fantasy managers for sure. And then even was worse over his last 12 starts, 6.87. Now, I looked at this at the beginning and said, well, he's probably a project. Maybe Houston can turn him around. Maybe by next season he could be a good asset. But I happened to catch some of his first outing as an Astro, and he looked darn good. He looked like he had figured something out, or whether maybe the Houston coaches had said something to him or whatever. But, I mean, we've always known he's got the stuff. And if he's pitching with a Houston offense behind him, that could be pretty interesting. But, he's always a risk at home because that left field at Houston is easy to reach. So he could give up home runs. But I would say, again, if you're interested in taking a flyer and he's around in your league, I would say he certainly could be one of these guys that gets new life with a different team.
Yep, I agree.
And then the other thing they did was they promoted Pedro Leon, who I thought might be interesting, but then they didn't play him at all. And then I guess tonight is his first time in the lineup. He's sort of been sitting on the bench for 3 or 4 days. So I would say, yeah, you could sort of watch what he does. He did hit for power and have some speed in the minors. But I say it's pretty difficult to add him when we don't really know if the Astros are going to play him.
Yeah, he is in the lineup for the first time on Saturday night, playing right field. So They've had Chas McCormick in there a couple of games this week. He's been really disappointing. I really
Yeah,
liked Chas McCormick coming into the season.
yeah.
They had Dubon play a game there in right field. So I think if Pedro Leon does anything close to what he was doing in the minors, he probably sticks.
He could, but they gotta put him in the lineup to see that. But we'll see.
Yep.
We'll see. I always think it's a shame when they bring a kid up and then they just put him on the bench and they just say just watch kid. I mean, anyway, right now I wouldn't add him. But that's just my 2 cents. So the Angels, poor Mike Trout, he's out again for the year. That's terrible. But they didn't really get much at the major league level for anybody. They traded away Luis Garcia and Carlos Estevez. They held Tyler Anderson. I'm not sure why. They held Luis Rengifo. They held Tyler Ward. So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, but it doesn't really change too much for the Angels, except for the closer spot, which I think everybody thought was going to be Ben Joyce. And he's 77% owned in 12s and all 100% owned in mains. But then, of course, they gave Hunter Strickland the first chance at closing. And he got one save and then blew another one. So I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how many saves the Angels are going to get. I mean, if Joyce is around, sure, I would try to add him. But I'm not sure you really want to go deep and go for Hunter Strickland. But what say you, Kevin?
No, I agree. I still think it will end up being Ben Joyce, even if we see Strickland get another opportunity or two. But yeah, and they're not going to win a ton of games. Now, the interesting thing with Ben Joyce, his last 3 appearances, and it's been every other day this week. He pitched Sunday, then Tuesday, then Thursday, and he did get a hold in each of those appearances.
Okay.
So he's performing well, and he had a lead in all 3 of those games. And like you said, Strickland did get the save in one of them and then blew it in the other. So I'd like to see Ben Joyce get that opportunity
Right.
in the 9th inning the next time they have a save out there, because yeah, I did speculatively add him in a couple of spots like many people did
Right.
according to his rostership, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's on a lot of rosters right now. People are waiting for it. So hopefully they give the kid a shot. Not sure what they're gaining by trying Hunter Strickland out, which, just on a side note, I don't know if you remember about 4 years ago, I think Strickland was pitching for the Mariners, and he was in the Japan series, and he got 2 saves in the first 3 games. And he got drafted like in the 12th and 13th round because, people wanted those 2 saves. You can in those situations, you get credit for things that have already happened in those Japan games. So anyway, it was just funny that,
like Hudson this year.
Yeah, Hudson this year, but although he got
I think we had a win and a
win
save
and
out
a
of
save,
him.
right? So yeah. But it was even more. People pushed Strickland even more. But anyway, that's just a side note. I don't think he's Mariano Rivera quite yet.
Right, I agree.
Okay.
Let's move on to Oakland, and my biggest thing with Oakland, because they didn't do a lot here, and you do have a couple of names, but I just want a quick reminder for those in keeper leagues, and if you're at the point where you're selling and looking towards next season, guys like Brent Rooker, Lawrence Butler, those are targets for me in keeper leagues with them playing their home games in Sacramento next season. So just something to remember if you're selling in a keeper league.
Now I was with you on that, and I thought the same thing. And then now I mentioned James Anderson because he knows a hell of a lot more about the minor leagues than I do. So he told me that Sacramento, while it's got a rep as being a really bandbox hitter's park, is not really the launching pad of the minor leagues. It's kind of a middle of the road place compared to like Albuquerque and some of those other places. So he's not 100% sure that the home runs are going to be flying out of there. And also there's a chance that they could change the dimensions before next year even starts. So I would just
That's true.
I would
I,
just
I just I don't think it's going to be crazy like what we saw Toronto do in 2020, but
right.
I do think that it's still easily an upgrade over Oakland.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
Oakland's one of the toughest places. But yeah, I don't think if
right.
people are expecting, Las Vegas, type stuff,
No, 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 no.
it's not going to be that kind of a place. But
That's a
anyway,
great
yeah.
point.
So the note I had for the Athletics was Tyler Ferguson looks like he's the closer now because they traded Urseg, but maybe he only closes for a week or two because Mason Miller's injury is to his left hand, which is not his pitching hand, and maybe he can pitch with a splint or something. So I wouldn't go crazy with Tyler Ferguson, and maybe the A's don't get tons of saves anyway, but I would say there's not much actionable as a result of the trading deadline for Oakland.
Yeah, I agree. What do you see going on up in Seattle?
Seattle. So my son lives in Seattle, so I follow the Mariners kind of closely. I went to a game earlier this year up at T-Mobile Park. It's kind of a nice place. But they got Yimi Garcia, Randy Arozarena, and Justin Turner. And Yimi is a good, I guess it's Jimmy, but Jimmy is a good reliever, but I don't think he's going to close over Munoz. Maybe he gets a few saves. So I think he's largely a drop if people are rostering him for saves. Arozarena is already widely owned, so it doesn't really change his value. Maybe hurts him a little bit because the park is tougher. But Justin Turner, surprisingly, has been hitting really well. He's now 20 for his last 46 with 2 homers. That's like 430. So I think he's capable of going on a heater the same way you were describing for Mr. Renfroe. And so if you need a first baseman, I think Turner has figured something out, and he's also batting in the middle of the lineup for the Mariners. And I would certainly consider him this weekend if you have an opening in your corner infield.
Absolutely. I think, we were starting to think maybe it's over for Justin Turner, but when the guys with his talent get it going late in the year, I feel like they just were waiting for it to get hot outside so the muscles don't ache as much, and let's go. I would like to briefly mention Victor Robles is now leading off for Seattle on an everyday basis and running wild on the base paths, stealing a ton of bases. So he is universally rostered in the main event, but he's available in about 16% of 12 teamers and definitely 12 team viable if you need stolen bases.
I agree 100%. And the Mariners, they were the worst offense in baseball for a while. And now they scored 8 runs.
And then they had that outing against Drew Thorpe, and they've been hitting ever since. They just
they're like going crazy. My son can't believe it because he was like, these guys can't hit the broadside of a barn, and now all of a sudden, I don't know, baseball's kind of crazy sometimes. It's like you get all of a sudden the team changes and things look a lot better. So, anyway.
I got to tell you, Todd, this is agonizing actually, but my main event team, Drew Thorpe had been performing really well until he got ambushed by Seattle. But I thought that was just a fluke, so I left him in my lineup, and I had to eat the outing against Kansas City as well. I had both of those horrible outings in my lineup.
Oh God, yes, it's tough because a lot of times a pitcher has a rough outing, and then it was just something that snowball. They're back to their normal standards the next outing, and I feel your pain. I think. Thorpe is a good young arm, and I think he's fine. The only thing about him is that his best pitch is his changeup. So I feel like because that's a sort of a field pitch, that if he loses it, maybe the thing is he loses it for a few games and not just one outing. But anyway, that's only a theory. I don't know, but it's too bad. Sometimes the game can bite you like that, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. Texas didn't do a whole lot. There were
No,
some that thought they might sell some pieces, and they
right.
didn't really do much here
No,
at
they
the
didn't.
deadline.
Yeah,
They
I
have
think
recalled Ezekiel Duran, but he's somebody I liked coming into the season. But even when he has gotten playing time,
right.
and even when it's versus lefties, he just hasn't done much this season. So I
No,
don't see much in Texas. Do you see
no,
anything
there's
different?
nothing going on. They got Andrew Chafin to help their bullpen, but I think they're pretty much standing pat and just figuring that the guys that won it for them last year, they maybe have a chance to do it again.
Well, that wraps up the American League, Todd. We're actually moving through this pretty well. Let's take a really quick break and we'll come back and start on the National League.
Okay.
All right, we are back. This is On the Wire. I am Kevin Hastings, joined this week by Todd Whitestone of FTNFantasy.com. And we're going team by team. We've just got through the American League, Todd. And let's just get right back to it
Yep.
and jump into the National League of what we saw going on this week with the trade deadline.
Right. So Atlanta brought back an old friend, Jorge Soler. He goes back to Atlanta. He's got a 240 batting average in San Francisco, but Atlanta's a little better place to play. And plus, he might get a little rejuvenated from the trade. So he's probably going to play the outfield because Ozuna's the DH. But I think he gets a slight upgrade, but he's 100% owned. So it's not really a big deal for fantasy. I just feel like maybe Atlanta can start to play a little better. They were really in the dumps when they lost Acuna, Harris, and Albies. But maybe now I don't think they're a threat to win the world title, but I think that they could still get into the playoffs.
Yeah, my thing with Jorge Soler, where kind of similar to what I was talking earlier with Colton Cowser, he was a guy I hadn't dropped, but I'd been benching him some half weeks,
Okay.
depending on matchups. But now in Atlanta, he's right back in the leadoff spot, 4 straight games. So he's back in my lineup this weekend and probably will be going forward if he's
Yep.
going to continue to lead off.
Right. He's very similar to Ronald Acuna, right, as a player. So that he's as a leadoff man. No, I'm just kidding. Acuna stole 73 bases. I don't think Soler is going to steal 7. So anyway,
Right.
yeah. But Atlanta's
The
starting
great
to hit.
thing.
What's that?
What's that? No, you go ahead, please.
Atlanta's starting to hit. I was going to say Matt Olson finally starts to hit. Austin Riley has looked better. I think maybe they'll score runs in better numbers than they were in the first half.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy that has started to hit in that lineup is Orlando Arcia. He had been
Right.
terrible. Now I had dropped him. He was my middle infield target in every draft. I wanted him as my middle infielder after what he did last year. I thought he was a little underappreciated, and then I was wrong. He was horrible for the first half of the season. But he entered Saturday on a 13-game hitting streak with 4 home runs in his past 6 games, and he's up to 5th in the lineup for the past 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
So I am happy that I did grab him back in a couple of spots, and in others, if he's available, he's definitely a target of mine this weekend.
Agreed. Yeah, I drafted him in one league and I hung on for a month and a half or something, and then
it was bad.
Couldn't do it anymore. Yeah,
right.
It was really bad. Okay, the Marlins. So we
got a couple of prospects added to the lineup here.
The Marlins, yeah, they got Stowers and Norby, and of course, I found it humorous, but it probably wasn't humorous. But they sent Connor Norby down because they wanted to get more control over him going forward. So even though he's probably one of the better hitters they would have, he's now in the minors. So he wouldn't be a pickup, or he would be a drop if you already had him, as I did in a couple leagues. Stowers, though, he's got good power. He hasn't hit the first few games, but if they keep playing him, I think he will show power. and he should bat in the middle of the lineup. It's not a great lineup, but I think him getting a chance is certainly worthwhile. If you have a 5 outfielder team and you need an outfielder with power, I think he's worth considering.
Yep. Yep. I was just trying to double check the lineup here on Saturday,
Okay.
because what has been interesting for me, yeah, he's right back there. Everyday shortstop, leadoff hitter, Xavier Edwards. He's
Oh
rostered
yeah.
almost everywhere,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
is still available in a few 12s, and that needs to change if
Yes. Yes. He should be
because
100%.
he's stealing bases almost on a nightly basis.
Yeah. He's been great. He's been great. I
And
missed the boat
Stowers
on
is
that.
in there for the fourth game in a row since the trade, and
Yeah.
hitting fifth again. So he did hit third that first game, but now four straight hitting fifth in the lineup. But I do like Stowers in that spot as well.
Yeah. I don't think they have anybody to really put in unless he really, doesn't hit at all. And I don't expect that to be the case. Um, then,
Agree.
yeah.
Agree.
So the other interesting thing about the Marlins is their closer, Tanner Scott is gone,
Hmm.
and they have Andrew Nardi, Calvin Foucher, and Anthony Bender. Nobody really knows what they're going to do. But I've heard people say all three of these guys are the leader or the most likely to get saves. I'm not sure what to think, but I certainly wouldn't begrudge anybody that wanted to pick up one of them and hold them and see what happens. Foucher had a bad outing the other day. He gave 3 runs. I'm not sure whether that sinks him or not for the near term. Nardi is a lefty. He came in the 6th inning recently. So I don't know. It's really a bit of a conundrum. But certainly you could take your chances with one of them and just put them on your bench.
I agree. I think it's still up in the air, and I could make a case for specking on any of the three. The guy I did spec in a spot was Nardi, but I don't think he has anything above Bender or Foucher. It
Right.
was just that he was cheap and he was in my waterfall, and I got
There
him.
you go. There you go. Well, that's what happened to me. I got Bender,
Same
and
way.
same way. It was like $1 at something or other. So let's see what happens. But I guess Marlins have to get a save opportunity first. So,
Right,
so
right. Foucher got the chance on Friday night, as you said, and blew it. So
yeah,
we'll see if one of the other two gets the next chance. The Mets added a couple of guys here, Todd.
yeah. They got Winker, Jesse Winker, and Paul Blackburn. I think those are pretty good ads for the Mets. Not a Mets fan, of course, but Winker is great. Also against righties, he's especially good, and I think he'll be fine, and at least until Starling Marte comes back. And next week, if I looked at the schedule right, the Mets have almost all righties. So I think that Winker is a good guy to have on your roster next week.
Yep.
Blackburn is a good, solid pitcher. He's been sort of wasted in Oakland a little bit, but I think with a good park, he could be fine, especially depending on the matchups with a better team behind him. So I certainly would endorse picking up Blackburn if you need a guy. And I've forgotten who he gets this week, but I could see holding him even if he has a bad matchup next week.
Yeah, the intriguing thing to me this week for the Mets is Tyrone Taylor is starting for the 3rd consecutive game here on
Oh,
Saturday. This is something I want to monitor on Sunday as well, because Harrison Bader's been on the bench for 2 of those 3 versus both a righty and a lefty. So I want to see if this continues. If Tyrone Taylor's going to get more playing time, I might have a little interest there. He doesn't do anything extremely well, but he
right.
does give you a little bit of everything. He's one of those guys I'd love to have on my bench for if I need somebody for the
Sure.
weekend, if I have
Sure,
an
sure, sure.
injury earlier in the week. Yeah.
Yeah, and Bader was playing well for a little short burst, but then he had a few bad games, and then they went to Taylor, as you said. So maybe they're just going to sort of mix and match the two of them, and see who's playing better.
Philadelphia, one of the best lineups in baseball,
Yeah,
added to both ends here.
yeah. So they got Carlos Estevez and Austin Hayes. Both are very interesting. Let's talk about Estevez first. Estevez, was closing in Anaheim, and he comes in to a situation where Jeff Hoffman was getting most of the saves. Alvarado kind of pitched himself out of the closing situation, at least temporarily. So the question is Estevez going to take over, or is he going to share with Hoffman? Um, I think I come out that Estevez is going to share, but maybe have a little bit more of the opportunities, maybe 60 or 70%. But I don't think he's going to be the 100% closer. But he's having a great year, which kind of surprised me because last year I think he was pretty bad. Um, but anyway, I think if you have him already, he's been pretty much 100% rostered. Certainly worth keeping and seeing what happens. Um, and then Austin Hayes, I was really wrong about. Last week, I thought he was just going to platoon against left-handed pitchers, and he looks like he's going to play every day. So I think he's an ad if you can possibly do it. He's 20% owned in 12s and 75% in the main. So if you have a chance to get him, I certainly think in a good lineup, Austin Hayes is worth an ad, maybe a pretty decent bid, not top of the line, but maybe a strong bid.
Yeah, this is I'm loving this for Austin Hayes. He is hitting ninth versus right-handed pitching, and moves up in the lineup versus lefties. In fact, he hit second in the lineup on Thursday versus a lefty. That was really good to see. Already has a home run. Already has 2 stolen bases. The only 2 stolen bases he has on the season are both in the 5 games since he's come to Philadelphia. That could be amazing for Austin Hayes.
Sure.
And with the Philadelphia lineup, I'm not as concerned with him being in the 9 hole. I think most games
Yeah.
he will get his 4 plate appearances.
Yeah, I agree. So I think he'll be fine
Yeah.
if he can just lock down there. He'll score runs even from the 9 hole position.
Yep, absolutely. I like this a lot for him, especially like you said, that he's starting against righties and he's right back in there on Saturday after getting Friday night off. So he's
Yeah.
now played in 6 out of 7 since coming over.
Yeah, I
That's
think
amazing. Love it.
he's the left
How
fielder.
about
He's the
the
left fielder.
Yep. How about the Nationals?
So Washington, they got no major leaguers, as you might have expected before the deadline. They just want to get more minor leaguers, which they did, but they held on to Kyle Finnegan, which I thought was a surprise, but he's still
A
there.
pleasant surprise for a couple of my teams.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, some fantasy managers are happy about that. Um,
Yeah.
the guys that might get an upgrade are outfielders Alex Call and Travis Blankenhorn, who came up from the minors, and you know they both should get playing time. Call is maybe a better average guy and has more steal potential. Blankenhorn has more power. I would say Call is a little bit better asset, but I think they've been in there most of the time so far. The other guy is Harold Ramirez, who's UT only in NFBC leagues. He should get regular DH at bats, and he's a good average hitter. He's not much power, but he hits for average. So again, depends on your needs, but maybe in a deep league, one of these three guys can be a help to you. I would say Call would be my favorite of the three.
Yeah, Call is one of those guys that just seems to always be available if we need him. I remember
Yeah,
using him multiple occasions, picking him up, dropping him, picking up and dropping him all last season, and there was streaks where he was really good. Blankenhorn started for the third consecutive game Saturday night. And you know what, Todd? You open up a box score, you see 4 plate appearances, 1 run, 1 hit, 2 RBI. You're like, "Oh, he hit his first home run." No, it wasn't. It was a double. But he did get his first major league hit here on Saturday night. And
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
like you
he's
said,
good.
24 home runs and 401 plate
Yeah.
appearances so far at AAA. This is definitely somebody to keep an eye on if he's going to get the playing time.
Yeah. I was going to say he's capable of hitting home runs, even if he didn't hit one already. But he's certainly got big power. He can strike out a lot too. But again, if you need power, that's the kind of guy I would think about rostering.
Chicago, I felt so bad for Sarah Sanchez that her favorite player got traded
Yeah.
away, but
Yeah.
they got back a pretty
Yeah.
good hitter in return.
Yeah. Isaac Paredes, I think, is a more complete player than Christopher Morel. I mean, Paredes is a better fielder, and
Right. That's why the move was made, I think.
right, and also, a lot has been made of Wrigley is longer down the line than the Trop, so his pulled home runs are going to be much less. But especially this year where it's like 2 months of the season and it's just affecting home games, and also Wrigley. There could be days when the wind is blowing out at Wrigley.
Exactly.
I don't think he's going to lose that much over the last 2 months of the season. So I would say he's
I
still
agree.
a good asset for this year. They got Nate Pearson, who's not going to close, I don't think, but he's just going to be an arm in the bullpen. He's always been sort of a talented, tantalizing guy. But I don't think that really is a fantasy option right now. So they didn't really do much. I don't know if Chicago really knows if they're competing or if they're trying to sell or what they're doing, but I don't think there's really much to do for the Cubs.
Yeah, I think that there's not much actionable. Even Pete Crow Armstrong rostered everywhere 'cause he's been stealing bases, so
Right,
he got snatched up really quickly. Nico Horner's starting to run again. That's good to see.
right.
But yeah, none of these guys are available. I guess in a very shallow league, you could check and make sure that Cody Bellinger was picked back up, but
Right.
yeah, there's really not these guys aren't available.
Yeah, I mean, I unfortunately bought into Dansby Swanson this year, and that really didn't work out for me. I thought he would
Yeah,
have a
same.
reasonable year. So anyway, let's move to Cincinnati, a little
Yeah.
bit more exciting team. They got Ty France, Jacob Junis, and Joey Weimer. Weimer, we can talk about quickly because he got sent to the minors. France, he's interesting. He had a terrible year in the Seattle, and then he sat the first couple of games for the Reds, but then he's been in the last couple, I think. So
Yeah,
I
hit
don't know.
cleanup both games versus left-handed pitching.
Yeah. So if they're going to really play him, and they moved Candelario to DH, if they're going to really play him, then maybe certainly that's a great park. And if he can figure something out, he's going from one of the worst parks to one of the best for hitting. And he's got a lot of interesting guys batting near him. I certainly could see him being an addition there as well. And Jacob Junis, he's more of a reliever, but he's a pretty good reliever, and he's a multi-inning guy. So I guess in the right situation, you could roster him, and maybe you want to rotate somebody out of your lineup that has a really bad matchup.
Yeah, this is kind of a tough because I think many assume that Ty France could be short side platoon, but
Right.
we haven't seen enough yet because they've faced three out of 4 games they've faced lefties since he's been there,
Yeah.
and the I don't think it's if Ty France can perform versus righties better than they think. Oh goodness, I just drew a blank. I got to look quick. Will Benson. because
Yeah,
that would be the move, right? Because Spencer Steer will move to left field,
right.
even against righties, not just against lefties. So Ty France, if he can out hit Will Benson versus righties, we might see more than just short
Yeah,
side platoon, but we're
yeah,
not going to
yeah.
know for a while.
Yeah, Benson has been a disappointment too. So it's not like
Yeah.
France has to
So it's
bat.
possible.
Yeah, he doesn't have to bat 350 to beat out Benson, as far as I'm concerned. But we'll see. We'll see. I think it's one to monitor. I think if even if you don't pick him up, he might still stay on the wire, and you might see what his situation is next week.
Yeah,
Um,
very nice. Todd, I want you to please tell me that the move to Pittsburgh is a good thing for Brian De La Cruz, because I don't want anything to mess up what he was doing this
yes.
season. He's my most rostered player, and
Okay.
I need him to keep doing what he's doing.
All right. Well, I got him on 2 leagues too, so I'm with you. He's been very good this year,
Yeah.
and I think he'll be fine in Pittsburgh. I don't think he's going to be a downgrade. I don't necessarily think he's an upgrade either, but I think he's going to bat in the middle of the lineup, and maybe it's a slightly underwhelming lineup, but still, he's going to have a good position, and he's a good, solid hitter. I don't see anything that's going to mess that up for him. And I think Pittsburgh could surprise some people down the stretch. I don't think they're a juggernaut offense or anything, but I think that they have some potential, especially with O'Neal Cruz doing better. So anyway, I'm bullish on that. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa was also added, but he's injured right now, and I think he'd just be a utility guy later in the year when he gets healthy.
Yeah, it is nice that they slid De La Cruz right into the cleanup spot every
Yeah,
game since he came over. That's good to see. Another player that's always out there available for us when we need him, Michael A. Taylor is heating up a little bit recently. He's kind of
yeah,
a streaky guy too, but he's typically, in his part-time playing time, he usually has a full season pace of being about a 2020 player,
yep,
and right on cue, 2 home runs and 2 stolen bases in his
yep,
last 6 starts,
yep,
is hitting at the bottom of the lineup. And with a team like Pittsburgh, that is an issue.
yep.
But if you need an outfielder, he's there.
He's a perfect 15 team outfielder, I think.
Yep.
He's just a guy that you can usually get, and he usually gives you something. Steal, homer, RBI, something.
Yep. Definitely. St. Louis got an old friend back.
Yes, they brought back Tommy Pham, who because he's so friendly. I just think that's. But anyway,
and they parted ways the first time so graciously, right?
Yes, I know. So they were like, we need Tommy around. But anyway, he's back. They got Eric Fetty is probably the big acquisition. But Pham, he's 89% rostered in 12s and 100% mains. And he's still playing every day. I mean, I had a thought that maybe he was just going to platoon, but it's not happening. He's playing every day. And, I think he's the kind of veteran, Kevin, that doesn't get thrown off by a trade. He's had it enough that, as opposed to some guys that like take a couple weeks to get adjusted, he's like, no, where do I hit? What do I got to do? And so he's a professional guy. I think he'll be fine in St. Louis, and just continue to roster him if you already have him.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say quickly, that he didn't start the first game when he came over, but he came in and had that pinch hit grand slam we all saw the highlights of.
Yeah.
But in the 3 games since then, he has started all 3 and 5 for 12 in St. Louis to start out.
Yeah, he's solid. He's solid. He's playing better than some of the other guys that have been regular. So, Fetty is also a good acquisition, and he's going to be pitching in a good park with a better lineup around him. He's completely rostered, so I wouldn't necessarily be thinking you can get him unless you're in a Yahoo or ESPN league, perhaps. But he's solid. I think it's a good get even for the future for St. Louis, and at least they did something. Now, the only other thing I wanted to mention is that it would be worthwhile to monitor the outfield rotation because we got Nootbaar, Burleson, and Siani, and we got Pham now also, and I'm not sure they're all four going to be in the lineup every day. So I would say if you got one of those guys, like I have Nootbaar in a couple of spots, I would just watch what his playing time is, and maybe if he's the odd man out, maybe you have to make a decision.
Yeah, he is sitting Saturday night, but he
Yeah,
did start the last two, one versus a lefty, one versus a righty. So
right.
I don't think it's a strict platoon
No,
thing, but yeah, I think you're right. All these guys could lose a little bit of time.
right, right. Um, okay, we're going to our last division.
Yeah, we're rolling right through this, Todd.
They said we couldn't do this, and here we are. Here we are closing in on it. Adam's going to be so
Very
proud
nice.
of us.
Yes, he is.
Okay.
By the way, Adam and his wife are at the Blink 182 concert this
Oh
evening.
no.
That's
Oh,
that's why he couldn't be here. So
oh my
he's
God.
having a good
Okay.
time, but I'm sure he'll be listening tomorrow morning.
All right. Good. Well, Adam, I hope you had a good time while we went through every team here. All right. So Arizona gets AJ Puck and Josh Bell, both very interesting guys, especially in fantasy. AJ Puck, 19% owned in 12s, 56% in the main. And he's, maybe the heir apparent for closing because Seawald has been taken out of the closer role, according to the manager. But we're not 100% sure it's AJ Puck. But Puck has been really pitching well. So it would make sense that he's maybe the guy, although I think Ryan Thompson got a save. So maybe we should hold off a little bit. I don't know what to advise people to do, but it looks like it could be a committee. It could be Puck. It could be Thompson. It could be Seawald in a week and a half. I don't know. It's kind of a mess there. Josh Bell is coming over as a result, I think, of the Christian Walker injury, which hurts
Absolutely.
it hurts my main event team, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, that's a big hit.
Yeah, he was
Walker's having a great year.
Yeah, he was doing great for me, and he's out at least 3 weeks probably. Bell has always been a guy, I don't know if you agree with this, that's streaky and that he can go on a heater and then in a month he can look like he doesn't know what baseball is all about. But I think right now he's on the better part of his streak. So he could be a good ad, especially for 3 or 4 weeks for the month of August. If you can get a hold of him, he's 69% in 12s, 97% in main events. So I would say you could look for him if he's available. He'll be hitting in a good lineup, and maybe he's good for 4 weeks, maybe even longer.
Yeah, I saw an update within the past day or two that they Christian Walker they expect him to be out another 3 weeks. So I think we have Bell for a good 3 weeks, and they slid him right into the cleanup spot right away.
Yep.
It was just a 1-for-1 move. They put him right in Walker's spot.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree 100%.
Yep.
And Puck is interesting because Thompson's actually got the last 2 saves, and Puck pitched in both of those games earlier in the game, both games. So it's starting to look like it could be Thompson here.
That would be crazy. But it'll be interesting to see what, especially the Seawald owners, do over the weekend as they go for Thompson. I mean, if they don't have Puck, maybe you can sort of save the situation by getting Thompson. But anyway, that's something to watch. Maybe over the weekend.
If Thompson gets another one this weekend, he's going to go for big money.
Sunday night, he should get one Sunday night, and then he'll go for like
so everybody's scrambling to bump their bids up.
$150, Anyway, all right. So Arizona, so Colorado. the Rockies, when you're stacked at every position, Kevin, you just don't need to trade.
Yeah. This is the team on the outline that combined with the two of us, we both wrote the least. In fact, I wrote nothing about Colorado.
Well, I wrote that they got minor leaguer Luis Peralta, which
Yes.
I didn't even know who he was. But they didn't trade McMahon, Quantrill, other people that I could have mentioned. I just don't know what Colorado's doing. I mean, it's just kind of sad in a way because I mean the Denver fans are really strong.
Oh, yes.
They are good sports fans, and I just feel like Colorado, since they've joined the MLB, they've just done nothing for these fans, and I don't know what they're all about. So anyway, Rockies, less said about them, the better. Let's move to the Dodgers. Always an interesting situation. They traded for Ahmed Rosario, Michael Kopech, Tommy Edman, Kevin Kiermaier, and Jack Flaherty. So let's take them one at a time, and let's pause and you can make comments after each one. I thought Ahmed Rosario, who's 72% owned, could be a regular contributor to the lineup, especially, right now when they're sort of down a few people. But he really hasn't played. So I think I'm wrong about that. I don't think he's the pick up. If he's not playing now, I don't know that they really are going to do it. The last 3 days
unfortunately, so far it looks like they're only going to use him versus lefties, and we know the Dodgers are capable of making that move.
They're playing. I think they were playing Kevin Biggio, Kike Hernandez, and Gavin Lux in the infield, which I would say.
Nick Ahmed has played every day recently as well.
Yeah.
To add to your list, it's kind of baffling.
I would say Rosario is a better hitter than everybody except maybe Lux, and only Lux because he's really been on a heater lately.
Right.
But I think he's a solid player. But anyway, it doesn't matter what I think. They're not playing him, so I would say don't start him. Don't pick him up either right now. Then the second guy, Tommy Edman, so we don't really know what they're going to do with him either. And there'll be more people back when Edman returns. But he could play. The good news about him is he's more of an outfielder than I think Rosario. And I think that's where they might need more help. So Edman could be more of a contributor, but again, I don't know how deeply fantasy managers want to get into this before they even see a lineup with Edman included.
Yep, I agree. It was really intriguing for me to see how much playing time Lux, Biggio, Hernandez, and Ahmed have been getting. And it looks like, at least in the near term, because they have guys that could be coming back relatively soon, but I don't think any of them are imminent. Right. So for the foreseeable future, at least versus right-handed pitching, those four guys are going to continue to play.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's not the vaunted Dodger lineup that we thought. I mean, right now with Freddie Freeman out, Mookie Betts out, it's not. And Will Smith has been surprisingly underwhelming lately. But again, I think they'll straighten out. They're still an outstanding team, but I just don't know how they're going to play it. I feel like they like to have 12 guys for 6 spots, and it's going to make it tough to roster them.
Yep, I agree.
The next guy is Michael Kopech. Now he's also interesting. Michael Kopech, if you guys have seen him pitch, he throws 100 miles an hour, but sometimes he doesn't know where the hell it's going, and his first outing as a Dodger was outstanding. I think he struck out all 3 guys. And so maybe they give him a chance to close. I don't know that the Dodgers want anyone to be 100% closer. Even when Phillips was pitching well, it didn't seem like they were ever going to be like he's getting all the save opportunities. So I don't know. You could certainly try Kopech and Adam. He certainly could be good, but you're sort of hoping that the Dodgers figure out how to give him more control.
Yep. That would be nice. And I think that's the only way we see him getting many ninth inning opportunities is if they do think they have a fix for his command there.
Yeah.
What do you think is going on in San Diego? This is where, this is why I'm so happy that, oh goodness, I draw a blank all the time, Todd. Gosh, who's my closer in Washington?
Washington Finnegan.
Yeah, Finnegan. I always draw blanks when it comes to names when they're talking. So Finnegan, I'm excited. And another guy that people were worried about, they're not as excited because he did get moved and may not, probably not, being the ninth inning guy now in San Diego.
Yes. So I think Robert Suarez is still safe in San Diego. They traded for Jason Adam and Tanner Scott, but
that Tanner Scott hurts a lot of people.
Hurts a lot of fantasy managers, but I think it looked like he was going to get traded for a while, so I think it was not.
Yeah, they knew it was coming, but it still hurts.
I agree.
There was that little bit of hope he could get moved somewhere where he could still close.
That's true. Well, the only comment I'll make about the San Diego bullpen is that I really think this was a great move from a baseball perspective. I think
absolutely
San Diego. I think again, I mentioned Minnesota and the AL. San Diego would be the similar sort of team in the NL, where I think that they're a little undervalued. The Dodgers could be caught for the division. I mean, they're not like 10 games ahead or anything. So San Diego gets Tatis back and they get Musgrove back and, they have a great bullpen. I wouldn't count them out just yet. I think that they are in pretty good shape. They got Martin Perez, who's, just an innings eater type guy. You might want to start him in certain matchups, but I would not recommend doing it too often. But anyway, I think San Diego is interesting, but more from a baseball perspective than from a fantasy perspective.
Yep, I agree, and I agree with your take on San Diego as well. I mean, the way Dylan Cease is pitching right now, that's 2 wins in any series they play, right?
My God, yes, he's been lights out. I mean, he's one of the best pitchers in the league this year, for sure.
Yeah, he's given up 5 hits in his last 4 outings over 27 innings. That's crazy.
Amazing. So yeah,
the one lineup note I'd like to make in San Diego is until Tatis returns, and what we're hearing this weekend, it's given me more questions than answers. It sounds like there's still not a timeline,
right?
But we keep thinking Tatis should be close to returning. But while he's gone, David Peralta is getting the playing time versus right-handed pitching, and I believe we'll continue to do so until Tatis returns.
Yeah, I agree. He's a good professional hitter. He can especially get you good batting average, in my opinion.
Some average and some nice stats. He doesn't hit a lot of home runs anymore, but just solid. But somebody much better than a 0 in your spot when you need him. Yeah,
agreed.
All right, last team, Todd. San Francisco Giants.
San Francisco. All right, so they got Mark Canha, was the only trade piece they brought in, if I'm not mistaken. So Canha should play regularly. He's solid. I don't know what your opinion is of Canha, but he's eligible at first and outfield in NFBC, and he's usually hitting for a decent average. He can pop a few homers. I would say if you need an outfielder or something, he's decent to fill in. I'm not sure he's a fantastic target or anything, but anyway, he's fine. The bigger news is that they brought up Marco Luciano, who's one of their top prospects, plays shortstop, and remains to be seen how well he'll do. But he has been hitting much better. He's sort of been underwhelming in the minors, but the last 3 or 4 weeks, he's been really hitting much better than he has over the last couple of years. So maybe the light turned on somehow for him. And if that's true, maybe he can give you good value over the last 2 months of the season, because I think he's going to play. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, which is I think even bigger news, is Hayden Birdsong, who's 40% owned and 83% owned in mains. Looks like he has a regular rotation spot since Cobb is gone and Jordan Hicks is now in the bullpen. He's a real good strikeout guy. He could have a little bit of control issues, but he's definitely worth trying to roster if your league has him available. So I think out of the three of them, I'd say he's the number one target from the Giants.
Yep, I like that. One quick note: I know Tyler Fitzgerald, still on his heater. I think he's 9 home runs in 12 games now. Absolutely crazy. He will not keep up that pace, but he is still available in a few 12-teamers. He's only 91% rostered in the online championship. So another guy to check. Just make sure he's not available in your league, because if he is, you want him.
Yep, he's great. He's been great. Amazing.
Excellent. All right, Todd, we are still going to do our category by category recommendations this week. It'll probably go really quickly because we've talked about almost everybody. We'll just highlight a few guys really quick after we take this break. All right, we are back. This is On the Wire. I am Kevin Hastings, joined this week by Todd Whitestone. Oh, Todd, we went through all 30 MLB teams, talked about all the moves they made this week, but let's still just highlight some guys in the categories for our listeners. We've probably talked about most of these players already, so this will go pretty quickly, but who are you looking towards if you need power this weekend in Faab?
Okay, so my number one guy is Kobe Mayo, who's 3% owned in 12s and not owned in mains. He's, I think, a fantastic prospect. He's been raking in the minors for a while. He's third base eligible. I think he's the guy to go after if you have the Faab. I think he's the guy. And in fact, I think I'm going to give you a take that might not be 100% popular with everybody, but I think he's better for this year than Jackson Holliday. I think he's more polished. He has more power. Holliday might be better long term, but I think Mayo is ready. So I could be wrong. You could laugh at me in a couple weeks, but anyway, Mayo.
You're hoping people in the leagues where they're both available are spending their money on Holliday so you can get Mayo.
Right. Yeah, I don't think Holliday's gonna be bad, but I did mention him later. But anyway, Mayo, and then the other guys I mentioned were Kyle Stowers, who we talked about. He's power. Miguel Vargas, who I think could hit some homers for the White Sox. And I put down Pedro Leon, but since he's playing for the first time tonight, I think we just hold off on him.
Very nice. Very nice. I have 3 guys we've talked about already. My number one, where he's available, Hunter Renfroe. We talked about that. His hot streak's 3 months long now. We also talked about Hayes in Philadelphia. I love that for him. And I'd take a shot on Blankenhorn getting his first hit here on Saturday night in his 3rd game. But I think he can stick and give us some home runs where we need them.
Okay. Good call.
I'm going to go first in the speed category because this is going to be really quick because Xavier Edwards, very, very little availability, but check. If he's available, he's who you want for speed. And then a guy that this is very specific, deep leagues where you really are hurting in stolen bases, but your batting average either has a big cushion or you're at the bottom and you're not worried about it anymore. Taylor Walls is still stealing bases with his 150-something batting average because he does get on base almost 30% of the time. So that and his defense keeps him in the lineup, and he will steal bases. But if you're If you're protecting your batting average, you cannot add Taylor Walls.
No. But that's like the scene from Moneyball where he says, "What does he do?" And he goes, "He gets on base. That's it."
Yeah.
You don't want me to point to Pete again, do you? And it's like that was a great scene. All right.
Yes, it was.
My guys for speed are Jackson Holiday, who I think will steal bases. I just don't think he's going to show the power that Kobe Mayo will show. Then I also have one of your favorite guys, Whit Merrifield. He's playing every day lately for the Atlanta Braves, and he can still run. And if he's batting near the top of the lineup, which I think he was the last couple of days, he can give you stolen bases and maybe score some runs. So, Whit would be a decent add. He's second base and I think outfield eligible as well. And then the third guy, which we already talked about, Alex Call, he can steal bases and he should be playing every day, just like Blankenhorn. And Washington runs as soon as they get to the ballpark and for batting practice. So I think Alex Call certainly could give you some steals.
Oh, excuse me. Absolutely. I love the Whit Merrifield call because he's playing every day. He's the everyday second baseman. He is actually hitting at the bottom of the lineup, but he's in that 9-hole. Once again, like we talked with Hayes, Atlanta's lineup is picking it up. So he's probably going to get his 4 plate appearances each game. And then he has Soler, Austin Riley, Ozuna, and Matt Olson coming up behind him. So we should get a lot of runs scored out of him as well.
Love that call. Would think. Sure.
Yeah. So opportunity this week, really quick. There are several teams with 7 games. Cleveland and Minnesota. Now they're both off Thursday, but have a doubleheader Friday. So we'll definitely want our Cleveland and Minnesota players in our lineup when we'll get 4 games out of them next weekend.
Yeah.
Miami, the New York Mets, Philadelphia, Washington, Cincinnati, Arizona, and San Francisco also all play 7 games this week. 3 teams with 5 games, the Chicago White Sox, Kansas City Royals, and Chicago Cubs. And it's 3 of those 4 plus another team are off next Sunday, right? So we have 5-game weeks out of these teams. And so the first half of the week, we're still get our 3.
Right.
We can use them the first half. Usually it's the first half and they're off Monday and Thursday and we don't want to use our players. We can use them in the first half, but for the weekend, we're going to want to, other than Bobby Witt Jr. and the elite guys, we're going to want subs for our players from the Chicago White Sox, Kansas City Royals, and Chicago Cubs, both Chicago teams next weekend. And with Cleveland and Minnesota having 4 games over the weekend, if you can somehow grab a Cleveland or Minnesota guy to substitute for those, that would be ideal. Problem is there's not a lot of Cleveland or Minnesota guys we're interested in that are available.
Yeah, I agree.
And Colorado is home for all 6 games this week as well, while Cincinnati's away for all 7.
Okay.
So with all that said, who you like? Oh, you got a Minnesota guy here. I like this.
I do. So I got first of all, Mr. Fraley. They get 7. Cincinnati gets 7 out of 7 right-hand pitchers. You don't usually see that, but they get 7. And he's 43% owned in 12s and 74% in mains. So he's kicking around, and he'd be a great play this week because he does hit right-handed pitchers pretty well. Then you got my old pal, Matt Wallner, who he's completely rostered in 15s, but in 12s, he's 39%. And he, Wallner's one of these great guys, Kevin. He strikes out a whole bunch, but when he hits the ball, it goes pretty far. And
some of them are still flying.
Yeah, I know. He's got great power. He's got 5 of 7 right-hand pitchers this week. And of course, as you mentioned, he's really attractive for the weekend when he's got 4 games. So I would certainly pick him up if you possibly can. And then the third guy I mentioned is J.J. Bleday for Oakland. He's 63 and 93%. And they have 6 games, but they're all against righties. So Blade, certainly he's been playing pretty well the last few weeks, and I think he's definitely worth a roster spot this week.
Yep, very nice. I like all of those, especially the Wallner pick there. And like I said, it depending on the format of your league and how deep it is, yeah, any of the Minnesota and Cleveland guys you
Yeah,
can get a hold of for the weekend, especially if you need if you have either Chicago's or Kansas City players, you're going to want to get them out of your lineup over the weekend.
definitely.
Could not agree more. Let's move over to pitching. Todd, you got some starters here we can grab some wins and Ks from this week.
Yeah, so I already mentioned Hayden Birdsong. I think he's a great ad where he is available, and he also gets 2 starts this week at Washington and then home to Detroit. So it doesn't get a whole heck of a lot better than that. Um, my second guy is David Festa, who's been back. He's looked pretty good since he's been recalled. He's only 9% owned in 12s. This is one of your situations, Kevin, where it's really
Big
a
gap.
big difference. Yeah, 93% in 15s, but only 9% in 12s. And then he gets at the Cubs in Wrigley Field and then home to Cleveland. And Cleveland's pretty tough, but I still think he's a worthy ad for next week. Then I want to mention Tyler Mahle, although he's not available in NFBC leagues. Even if you could pick him up in another format, would be a bench for this 2-star week, in my opinion, because he gets the Astros and then at Yankee Stadium. So I would say maybe just keep him in mind. You might want to go from next week. And then the last guy is Jeffrey Springs, who returned and threw 3.2 innings. And he gets a 2-start week, which I'm a little worried about, to be honest, at St. Louis and then home to Baltimore. So I don't know if I'd start him, but it's up to you. Depends on your pitching staff, but certainly he's worth considering and trying to add in your waterfalls.
Yep, very nice. I would reiterate what you brought up, Michael Lorenzen earlier. He gets, I believe,
Yeah,
Cleveland this week.
yeah,
He did finish tonight with 5 2/3, 5 strikeouts, only 1 earned run. So looking good in his first round with Kansas City. No, he gets St. Louis this week. Much better matchup than Cleveland. It's the other guy that I like. Now, this is a speculation. Uh, Cleveland with that doubleheader next weekend versus Minnesota.
mm-hmm.
Now, Jason over at Roster Resource has Louis Varland being the call up for that start in the doubleheader, which I
Okay,
agree with because Festa's already up.
yeah.
I think Varland's probably the only option. And if you're really in a tight spot, I might consider adding Varland and taking a risk versus Cleveland.
Okay, that's a good call. I didn't even see that.
Yeah, it's speculation. Minnesota hasn't said anything, but
Yeah.
I agree with Jason there at Roster Resource.
Okay.
All right, Todd. How about somebody that can help us with our ratios? This is the guy you have written down. This is my go-to guy. I think we've talked about him a couple times this season, but he's always available for us.
Yeah. Jacob Junis, who's now Cincinnati, he's good for multi innings, which is always helpful. And he can come in the middle of the game, a tie game or something, and give you a win. He usually doesn't get blown up or anything. He gives you some strikeouts. So I think if you're really up against it and you have a starting pitcher that you want to bench, you might want to pick up Junis and throw him in there. And I think you'll probably be happy with the results. So the other guy I didn't write down, but Ryan Walker for San Francisco. He's a solid pitcher. And again, he's one of their high leverage options. So that if the game is tied or the Giants are 1 down or 1 ahead, they would bring him in, and that way he could get a win. And usually he's going to get some strikeouts along with that. So those 2 guys, if you're up against it, I would say would be worthy additions to a roster.
I agree. A couple of guys that we talked about earlier. The additions in San Diego. Jason Adam, where he's available. Probably not going to get save opportunities, but he can help our ratios.
Yeah.
And Tanner Scott, he won't be available this week, but he's probably going to be dropped in a lot of spots this week.
Right.
We can grab him for the same reason next week.
And he could still get a save here and there. It's still
right.
So I think that's a good call, that he could still give you value.
All right. We've talked about most of these situations, Todd, but there are several spots where we have some spec moves we can make for saves if we're really hurting. Do you want to mention them all here?
So I just did it by team, so I'll just mention the teams that people can think about. So there's 5 teams that I thought were the most the places where you could mostly land a closer or a semi-closer. So Arizona, you have Puck and Brian Thompson. You can make your choice there depending on who's available. Kansas City, we talked about Lucas Erceg or Hunter Harvey could overtake MacArthur, so there's 2 options there. Miami, you have Calvin Foucher, you have Andrew Nardi, you have Anthony Bender. That's 3 options. Oakland, you have Ferguson, who's probably the only guy, but again, he's limited until Miller returns, so maybe only a couple weeks. And then the last one is Ben Joyce and Hunter Strickland for the Angels. So that's 5 teams. Normally, we might only have 1 team where you're thinking maybe I can grab a closer. This week there's 5. So I would say unless you're really set at closer, try to pick up one of these guys and hope you can get lucky.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to spend a lot of money because you can put every one of these guys on your list. They all have availability, right?
Yeah, sure.
So they don't have to be big bids. You just want one of them and hope, like you said, hope you get lucky.
Right. That's like what was the Clint Eastwood movie where he says, "Do you feel lucky?"
Yep.
So
the good old Dirty Harry.
That Dirty Harry. Do you feel lucky? Well, tell me, do you, punk? So we'll see.
Exactly.
We'll see.
All right. Adam loves to say that the wild card is his favorite category. It could be anybody for any reason that just didn't fit in a different category. Lots of times it's prospect specs or guys coming back from injury that we're trying to grab early. You have a guy on here, and you had him on here about a day early because he got the call today, but I still love the name.
Yep, I was on him. I still think he's going to give you value down the stretch. Parker Meadows, the Detroit, 27% owned in 12s, 91% in 15s. I think he's going to be the center fielder. He's pretty much the best option they have for that. He's going to play every day. He's got potential to hit. I just like the kid, and I feel like if you give him a shot, if you have an outfield opening, I think he should be kicking around most leagues. And I would just add him, and hopefully he'll produce for us.
Yep. Yeah, I like that call. I know we're getting pretty late in the season to be throwing, injury stashes onto our teams. But Jacob deGrom is up to 45 pitches in his most recent bullpen session, which was Tuesday. I don't think we're going to get a lot of starts out of him. However, Chris Young has agreed that it is possible we see him in August. So if we're going to see him in August and then all of September, 5 or 6 starts out of Jacob deGrom could be pretty nice.
Probably better than 5 or 6 starts out of almost any other pitcher.
Exactly. So maybe he's about 20% rostered in both 15s and 12s. So it might be time to, if you have an extra spot where we can still get him for, probably single digits in our $1,000 Faab leagues. The closer we get, that's going to begin to change really quickly.
Definitely. And also, Devin Williams is still kicking around a few leagues as well, and he's even back pitching. So I was kind of surprised to see that. I thought he would be 100% owned.
Yeah, that was great. That was nice to see because I had added him probably too early. I added him in a couple of spots, but I really didn't have closers and I didn't want to worry about it. And I was like, I'll just if I can have him for the second half, that'll be enough.
Yeah,
But even in the couple of spots where I hadn't done that, he was still available, and I was surprised. Yes,
yeah, I agree.
I agree with you there. Uh, Todd, we've talked about a ton on this show. Thank you so much. Give us some final thoughts going into Fab with about 10 weeks to go in the Major League Baseball and our fantasy seasons.
I mean, we're all down in Fab to some extent. I think this is a good time to really stay engaged because some other league mates might sort of drop out if they're in 12th place. But what I do this weekend, from my point of view, is spend a lot of time on your the ordering of your bids. As you mentioned, you
Yeah,
could have low dollar amounts, but you could have 8, 9 guys in a waterfall, and you could be happy with the seventh guy on the list. So I would, if you can take the time to make those long waterfalls and improve your team, I think you do it. And then hopefully you land on a guy that can really help you. I think there's guys out there this week. Another week we might say there's not that much available, but there's Kobe
there's
Mayo,
a lot
there's
this week.
Jackson Holiday, there's pitchers, there's closers, there's all kinds of stuff. So just stay focused, and I think you'll be happy with what you get.
Yep, I agree. There's a lot. This is what I would one thing I would be uh, very cognizant of this weekend is if you are someone that typically, say you typically spend 2 hours on your Fab, so you want to sit down by 7:30, 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to take more time this week,
Yeah,
especially if we're taking your advice and we're filling up our waterfalls. That allow for more time this week than we typically do for our Fab because there's a lot of options.
I agree. I agree, and I think there won't be there in a week or two. So you might as well spend the time now, and then hopefully you can really have a good team set up for the last part of the season.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Todd, that's going to wrap it up. Episode 175 of On the Wire. This didn't take it quite as long as I thought it might. We got in under 2 hours. That's
All right.
amazing for we knew it was going to be a long one.
Yes.
You can follow myself on the Twitter at Hasting Kevin. Adam is at 80 grade. Todd is at Telestar7. And of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. Once again, thank you so much, Todd Whitestone, for joining us. And after all that, I am Kevin Hasting on behalf of Adam Howe. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.